And the winner is Peter Falk, Columbo.
He was the detective no one could outsmart. But behind the scenes, even Columbo couldn't solve the darkest mystery of all: his own downfall. What really happened to Peter Falk in his final years? Why did Hollywood turn its back on the man who once ruled TV screens worldwide? And how did a scruffy, mumbling detective from the 70s suddenly become a viral sensation with Gen Z fans? Today, we're peeling back the curtain on the tragic end, shocking betrayals, and secret battles that nearly erased this legend, until an unexpected twist brought him roaring back. Was it fate, or something far more unbelievable? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see Columbo and Peter Falk forever. And just when you think you know the whole story, there's one more thing, and that's just the beginning. Rather than follow the usual whodunit path, Levinson and Link flipped the formula. Reveal the murderer at the outset, then let the audience savor how their unlikely hero would unveil the truth. Inspired by Dostoevsky's soft-spoken sleuth from Crime and Punishment, they envisioned Lieutenant Columbo as a bumbling-looking brainiac. It felt fresh, edgy, and immediately addictive. When that inaugural Columbo aired live on July 31st, 1960, it wasn't Peter Falk under the raincoat but Bert Fried, quiet, watchful, and laying the groundwork for what was to come. Yet Fried's portrayal was only the opening act of a legend, and live broadcasts meant the performance was lost to time, preserving the mystery of its true origin. You might think the story peaked there, but wait until you hear about the transition to the stage. In 1962, Prescription Murder debuted as a play starring the venerable Thomas Mitchell, his final curtain call before he passed away, aged 72. Audiences embraced this incarnation, even if it never quite made it to Broadway. Fast forward 8 years, NBC greenlights a TV movie, Prescription Murder, and suddenly the role demanded a face audiences could remember. Lee J. Cobb and Bing Crosby both bowed out, but Peter Falk seized the opportunity. Falk's clean-cut look, pressed suit, neat hair, soon gave way to that trademark rumpled raincoat, which he bought in a New York downpour for a mere $15. Little did he know it was crafted by a luxury Spanish label. To Falk, though, it was authenticity incarnate, and he even brought his own shoes, suits, and scruffy Peugeot to set, transforming wardrobe and props into extensions of Columbo's deceptively unassuming persona. Here's the real kicker. Falk didn't just stick to the script. He turned every scene into a subtle mind game, improvising lines, losing focus on purpose, and watching as guilt-ridden suspects cracked under pressure. He'd pull out a shopping list instead of evidence, or ask to borrow a pencil for no reason, delightfully throwing co-stars off their marks. The actors weren't in on the gag, but viewers were in on the joke, and it made every interaction crackle with tension. And there's more. Instead of a meticulously planned catchphrase, just one more thing was born of necessity. Levinson and Link needed to pad a short scene, so they sent Columbo back into the room with that throwaway line. What began as a lazy fix evolved into the series' most iconic moment, heralding the killer's undoing every single time. Believe it or not, Columbo's mystique extended even to his name. Creators never divulged his first name, and though you could glimpse Frank Columbo on a blurry badge now and then, they insisted on maintaining the mystery. Trivia writer Fred Worth once fabricated Philip Columbo to snare copycats and even fooled Trivial Pursuit. When Worth sued after the game printed the false name, he lost, but the myth only grew stronger. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, casting for guest star villains was a high-stakes endeavor. They courted legends like Orson Welles and Peter Sellers, but soaring fee demands and personal vetoes, Falk himself blocked Danny Kaye, kept some actors at bay. NBC executives fretted that withholding the hero's entrance for nearly 30 minutes would drive viewers away, yet Levinson and Link ignored the rules. They made As the show gained traction, Falk's portrayal turned into pure gold. He wasn't Hollywood polished. He was messy, real, unforgettable. Awards flooded in: 5 Emmys, a Golden Globe, and the love of an audience that couldn't get enough of his sly charm. The show's format, 90-minute episodes thanks to NBC's rotating schedule, allowed writers to stretch out tension, building intricate cat-and-mouse games that felt more like movies than TV. And when NBC shifted Columbo to Sunday nights, it became the crown jewel of primetime, crushing competitors and rewriting what audiences expected from television detectives. But perhaps the most staggering twist came when Columbo's reach crossed oceans. Syndicated in 44 countries, his underdog spirit resonated worldwide. In Hungary, fans even built a statue in his honor. In Romania, viewers mourned the series' end so deeply that Peter Falk had to reassure them this wasn't censorship, just closure. Decades later, the BBC still hailed Columbo as timeless, proof that the thrill of seeing the mighty fall never loses its power. And Hollywood's elite. They weren't offended. They were lining up to play the villain. Big names like Jack Cassidy, 3 times, William Shatner, twice, Leonard Nimoy, and George Hamilton all wanted their shot at being bested by the scruffy detective. Behind the curtain, rising stars couldn't resist Columbo's gravitational pull either. A 24-year-old Steven Spielberg directed an early episode, leaving Falk so impressed he predicted, "This kid's too good for TV." And then came a plot twist no one expected. Brian De Palma, a young director riding high after the thriller Sisters, suddenly submitted a script for Columbo, during a writer's strike no less. De Palma, who normally sneered at TV, was so captivated by Columbo's subversive edge that he partnered with critic Jay Cox, using the cheeky pseudonym Joseph P. Gillis, a wink to Sunset Boulevard, and crafted a dark, audacious story. Here's where it gets juicy. Their episode followed Quentin Lee, a fictional filmmaker who murders a talk show host just to prove he could commit the perfect crime, killing without motive. Lee, dripping with disdain for Hollywood's glittering fakes, randomly selects his victim from a list of celebrities he calls public zircons, cheap imitations of real gems. But his twisted art project doesn't stop there. He films the crime and secretly turns Columbo into part of his deadly documentary, shadowed by 3 film students, one of them named Spielberg, a sly nod to real-life events. This wasn't just a script, it was a meta-masterpiece, a hook so sharp, it still stings. But fate had other plans. NBC, scrambling under strike pressures, needed something simpler and faster. Enter Double Exposure, another script about subliminal messaging and mind games, easier to film, cheaper to produce. De Palma's layered vision was shelved, though fragments survived. The student filmmakers reappeared later in Mind Over Mayhem, and a character named Steven Spielberg winked at the past. Yet the real reason De Palma's script stalled? Tone. Columbo's villains usually had clear motives: greed, jealousy, pride. De Palma's version ventured into chaotic territory, blurring lines and darkening the waters. Still, the show's legacy remained untouchable. Peter Falk's personal fortune reflected his success. He wasn't just collecting awards. He was quietly amassing a luxurious empire. While his on-screen alter ego drove a weathered Peugeot, Falk in real life indulged in classic cars, including rare models like the 1966 Ferrari 275 GTB, worth millions today. His wrist flashed high-end watches, from vintage Rolexes to exclusive Patek Philippe timepieces, each chosen with an investor's eye. And speaking of things buried, let's rewind to when Columbo first started veering off its golden path. Take the 2003 episode Columbo Likes the Nightlife. Fans were expecting the same soft-spoken detective they grew up with, But instead, they got something that felt like a fever dream. There was Columbo, not in a quiet living room with cigar smoke curling in the air, but in a throbbing nightclub, feather boa draped around his neck, trying to piece together a murder among neon lights and pounding rave beats. He even fished a toenail clipping out of a toilet by hand. Yes, that actually happened. For longtime viewers, it was jarring, almost surreal. Was this really the same detective who once outwitted high society killers with nothing but polite persistence? Some called it bold, others couldn't hide their disappointment. But the real heartbreak? That episode ended up being the last we ever saw of Falk as Columbo on screen. A legend's final bow, and it played out in the most bizarre way possible. But this wasn't the first time the show lost its footing. Flashback to 1992's No Time to Die, the episode that felt like a horror flick more than a detective mystery. Instead of the classic opening where viewers meet the killer and then watch Columbo unravel the plot piece by piece, this one threw fans into chaos. Screams, panic, and a kidnapping during a honeymoon? It was so offbeat, so unsettling, that fans didn't know what hit them. And when Columbo pulled out a gun and joined a tactical unit in a violent shootout, well, let's just say that was a twist nobody had asked for. Yet even before that, in the late 80s revival years, things started getting strange. Remember Murder, Smoke, and Shadows? The villain wasn't a cold-blooded mastermind, but a flashy young director who felt more like a cartoonish parody of Spielberg than a real threat. Theatrics replaced tension, from over-the-top set pieces to a ridiculous 10-minute scene of Columbo wobbling on a waterbed. And let's not forget the big gotcha moment where cops dressed in costumes leapt out like they were in a Broadway show. Fans were left scratching their heads. Was this still the same clever cat-and-mouse game they adored? And it only got weirder. In Murder, a self-portrait, the detective's sharp reasoning was swapped for dream interpretations. Picture this: surreal visions of meat in a sink, pocket watches floating in teacups, and an odd French uncle who somehow held the key to solving the crime. Instead of logic, symbolism ruled the day, turning Columbo into some kind of pop psychologist who magically outdid trained therapists. It was messy, confusing, yet somehow left an impression, especially that eerie portrait gifted to Columbo at the end. But let's go even further back, 1972, when Peter Falk himself stepped behind the camera for Blueprint for Murder. Determined to prove he could do more than act, Falk fought production nightmares, from being stuck on real construction sites to paying extras out of his own pocket. He even rang up old friends like Spielberg for advice. But the final product? It was uneven. The pacing jolted from rushed to dragging, and even the music felt off, with the same Brahms concerto playing on loop until it grated nerves. Falk, juggling directing and acting, found himself drained. And though the effort was valiant, he never directed another episode again. Yet through every strange twist, there was always hope that Columbo would get one last hurrah. And that's what makes the lost 2007 script sting so much more. Here was a story crafted to bring him back to his roots. A clever psychological puzzle about a high-tech murder, where the tiniest detail, a faint clicking sound, was the thread that would unravel everything. It was modern, yes, but it stayed true to the character's core. Quiet deduction, slow-burning tension, and a final reveal that would leave audiences breathless. In 2007, behind closed doors, Falk's sharp mind started to dim. After what seemed like routine dental surgery, those closest to him noticed the first cracks. He was forgetting things, fumbling names, and within a year, the truth hit like a hammer. Alzheimer's. By 2008, the diagnosis was public, and the man who once unraveled killers with his quiet cunning could no longer remember the very role that made him a legend. In court, his daughter heartbreakingly revealed that he struggled to recognize even her face. The detective who always saw through people now saw only shadows. By 2009, hope for that long-awaited farewell episode was gone. And in 2011, Peter Falk left this world at 83, taking Columbo's last case with him. But Falk's fight to keep Columbo pure was the stuff of legend. He didn't just wear that old coat, it was his own. He didn't just mumble and stumble. Every pause, every offbeat line was calculated. Falk demanded perfection, refusing to let anyone rush him. Shoots meant to last 10 days stretched into double, as he'd stop mid-scene to dissect a line or question a character's motive. And if anyone dared to push him, even studio heads, they quickly learned. This was Falk's world. It's what made Columbo real. The detective felt less like a character and more like someone you actually knew, a friend who always looked lost until he wasn't. But Falk could be as stubborn as he was brilliant. When producers suggested Danny Kaye, a massive star, for a guest role, Falk flatly refused. To this day, no one knows the full story. Some say Falk feared that Kaye's comedic style would turn Columbo into a joke. Others whisper it was an old grudge. But Falk wouldn't budge. This was his show, and if someone didn't fit, they were out. No debate. That stubborn streak extended beyond casting. Writers on Columbo wrestled with the show's unique structure, where the killer was revealed up front. Most writers hated it. It meant every plot had to work backward, twisting tension from the inevitable. Out of 60 writers NBC approached, only 2 even dared to take it on. The writers' room became a battleground. They locked themselves away, sometimes pulling random people off the lot to help crack a tough scene. Larry Cohen, for example, stopped by to say hello and walked out with a writing credit because he solved a storyline no one else could fix. And when NBC ordered the episode stretched to 2 hours, the pressure exploded. Scripts got bloated with filler, and even fans noticed the quality started to slip. But here's where the story turns. Because just when everyone thought Columbo's time had passed, something wild happened. Decades later, between 2020 and 2023, Columbo exploded back into pop culture like a storm no one saw coming. Streaming platforms reported a staggering 300% surge in viewership. Why? People stuck at home during the pandemic found comfort in Columbo's slow, methodical pace, a soothing contrast to the chaos outside. And young viewers connected deeply with the show's subtle rebellion against the rich and powerful. After all, nearly every villain Columbo brought down was a wealthy elitist who thought they could outsmart a shabby detective with scuffed shoes. Falk's humble genius became an unexpected hero for a new generation. A detective who defeated the arrogant, humbled the mighty, and quietly slipped back into the shadows, only to be resurrected, meme by meme, stream by stream. And maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, he's still got one more thing to say.